afternoon, everyone. I'm going to go ahead and get started. Hi, everyone. My name is Corona Saha. I'm one of the conference coordinators for this conference. We had a couple quick announcements before we get started with our speakers this afternoon. First of all, I wanted to thank you for attending the conference. The whole committee hopes you're enjoying yourself. And if you have any suggestions, just let us know and fill out the surveys. I have one announcement about the PowerPoint. It seems that people are unsure about the presentation PowerPoints. We will be uploading them on our conference webpage. We will send a follow-up email to all the attendees and let you know when all that information is available. I also wanted to mention our evening event tonight at the Zimmerli Art Museum. The event will take place from 7 p.m. to 9 p.m. and it is an event for networking and heavy lifting. Next, I wanted to introduce our speaker for this afternoon, Tiffany Martindale. She is with EWB-USA. She's going to be presenting about how to sustain the projects that we're all working on. We do great things with the communities that we're working on. And when we're there, we know that these projects work. However, we want to make sure that they work in the long run for these communities. And Tiffany will be speaking about how to sustain these projects and how the reporting to EWB-USA. Thanks.
Hello, everyone. When I was sitting down there, I hear a little bit of a buzz, but can everybody hear me in the back on this? All right. If that changes, just do this for me. Okay. I guess first I wanted to ask who had turkey for lunch. Oh man. Okay. So I was going to aim my voice in a certain direction, but you're just going to all have to stay up. As is alluded to here on the title slide, I am going to be talking about impact today. We haven't focused much on it as an organization in the past. And I wanted to know first who all has a current program that they've been working on for the past however many years, some phase of assessment or implementation. Okay, so I think this is going to be really useful for everybody, but for those of you who have been kind of muddling through what we want you to do for monitoring and evaluation for the past few years, hopefully you're going to get really excited about this. We finally got some guidance for you. And has anybody looked yet? You're the last conference, so have you had a chance yet to look through these new resources? Anybody? All right, good. Okay. So still a lot of people who are new to this. So if I can get through it quickly, we might have some time for questions. But I have to hear myself say this out loud. I am not going to get into the details of this today. I will be very tempted to if you start asking the questions. So find me this weekend if you have additional questions, or contact your project manager if you have one you've been assigned to. So the way I wanted to start this is just thinking a little bit. I know a lot of you who've been around a while might be wondering, why are we looking at impact? Why is this something that all of a sudden we've been here for 10 years, we've been working on our projects, going along pretty well. What is it now that's changed? And I would answer that with another question back to you and just ask if you can say with certainty that you've done anything more than build a latrine or put in the solar system. Can you really say with certainty that you've had an impact on people's lives? Have you really created some positive change in their lives? And organizationally, we can't. We have a lot of good data coming back from you, which we'll talk about, but we don't know with certainty how we've really changed those people's lives. So we wanted to look at how we're doing this and focus on a more consistent way of measuring that change across the full organization. Okay, so here's our mission and vision again. I will always start with this. I think you've probably noticed all of us always start with this. I like to emphasize it again because it does drive everything we do. It's why I'm here. I know it's why the members are here. Our board and our donors are all really charged by it. This program in particular really focuses on both arms of our mission. So we want to get to more accountability to our communities, so that's being accountable to them really allows them to drive the program, so that's our community-driven side. And then making sure that we're creating those transformative experiences for you. A lot of you are students and don't yet know how much what you do now is going to be useful to you when you graduate and move into the field. And particularly if you're interested in international development at all, even in volunteer capacity, knowing how to do effective monitoring and evaluation is going to be key. So today I will talk a little about the background and some of the theory behind measuring impact. We will get into what EWB-USA has decided PMEL, measuring impact means, and defining what those letters are for us. And then I'll finally get into a few new resources for you that are going to help you measure your impact in the projects and then feed that back to us so we know what we're all doing out there. Now, a couple of these intro slides you saw this morning from Kathy, we have successfully implemented hundreds of international development infrastructure projects in communities all over the world. So we know we've done good work. We know we've built things. And that's kind of the extent that, to which we've measured our work in the past. We've made improvements. Most of you give us good feedback that we've made improvements in the reporting process. We now get a lot of good data from you, which is how we learn about successes like the top picture and some failures like the bottom, as Kathy highlighted this morning. But we're not yet sure how we're measuring, or how we're doing really in affecting change for people in their lives. So that's, we're trying to dig a little bit deeper. So, and this is another one you saw this morning, and again, I don't expect that you can read those in the back, but the key to pull from this slide is, as Kathy mentioned earlier this year, we had our Corporate Leadership Council, a lot of our major donors, our staff, surveys out to you, members of a few select chapters, and the board all got together and identified what it was that we thought success would look like. So if all of you, you're working on projects across the spectrum, and there's no one quick, short answer what that success will look like if you, quote, succeed. So we needed to understand what it is that our organization would consider success. And for us, what we've come up with is that all members, that's the center bubble, are going to experience an improved quality of life through access, use, and maintenance of technologies that are appropriate for them. And so the outside circles are where I think the color still works. You can get a sense, those are what we've called critical success factors. So in order for us to achieve our vision of success, all these other things have to be in play, and we don't have direct influence over all those things. So as we began this effort to understand how we can measure our impact, we needed to know what things we were going to study. And we certainly we didn't have the resources, and we don't have the capacity to study things that are outside of our influence. So the example that we're looking for a stable economic and social environment, that's not something that we can dive into measuring. But we can look at if the community has appropriate relevant technologies in line with their needs, if the community members are skilled in the projects that you've implemented in maintaining them. So that's kind of the background on that. We needed to know how we define success and what key elements were going to be our purview. So monitoring and evaluation is something that I think you've probably heard of in a lot of different organizations. Everybody talks about it. A lot of times organizations will do it to respond to donor demand. Maybe it's to improve your policies and improve your model. We sent out the survey earlier this year and heard back from most different stakeholders in our organization that what we wanted to do is be more accountable to our community partners and more accountable to our donors, both. So that's how we designed the program. And the monitoring and evaluation, though, efforts really usually just focus on what we've built. So we put something in, we check that it's there, we see if there's been any outcome as a result of its implementation. And we needed to take it a step further, as I've mentioned now a few times, change is what we're looking for. So when you get into a little bit deeper level in the impact assessment, what we are focused on is the planning. So first, thinking through what the issues are going to be in your community and how to solve them. And I'll probably bounce back and forth between analogies here and what you had to do just to arrive here at this conference, right? You thought about it, you decided you wanted to register, you wanted to sign up, you bought your tickets, or you made your plan to drive down, and then you get into monitoring, and you could do a little mini monitoring exercise and determine if your plan is going to, things are going according to that plan. So did your plane arrive on time, or did you plan for a 2.5-hour trip and end up on 4 hours of traffic? Monitoring is objective. It's just looking directly at whether or not the things you intended to do have been accomplished. And I'm going to highlight all of these in more detail. Evaluation then starts to look at what happened as a result of that plan going to plan. And then lastly, learning. That's the part that we really need to get at as an organization so that we can improve our processes, but also provide a better avenue for you to kind of tweak things along the way when you start to see that your project is not going right. Okay. So first, let's define these 4 elements for us. So for EWB-USA, what we've decided is that planning really is looking at, again, understanding the issues and the problems and trying to set out a course of action to deal with them. So at this point, you're really just doing a lot of thinking. You're anticipating quite a bit. It includes, this is the assessment phase of your work. So think about on your trips, you're conducting community outreach meetings. You are collaborating with your partner organizations, the municipality or the NGO, and just really identifying what the community's goals and strategies are. And so if we take this water supply project example, it's one where if you think about increasing flow through a new water distribution system in a community, in your assessment phase, you are confirming that, first of all, the things the community said they needed in their 501 application. I'm going to try in this first part of the talk not to focus too much on numbers, because some of you might be new. You don't know that we have this sweet relationship with numbers in our reporting. But the 501 is where we tease out from the community what it is they're looking for and what their goals are for our work together. And so in your assessment phase, you're confirming that you understand what those are, looking at what the current situation is related to those goals, identifying ways that you can meet them. And then the last one I think is key, the anticipating what will and will not lead to success. If you haven't planned ahead, you will likely waste a lot of time on your assessment trip studying things that are not yet related to what the community has come up with as their goal. So they come up with their intended outcomes for the program. And if you've done really effective literature review and you've identified all the ways that someone here in the States has written up ways to solve that problem, when you get there, if there are surprises, you've not made the best use of your planning effort to really be anticipating what those things are so that you can kind of work them into the new approach if they come up with something different. So then you move on to monitoring, and the key to monitoring is that it's ongoing. And part of this talk today is going to be a little bit of a new vocabulary lesson. So from what we used to refer to as monitoring, there's a little bit of a nuance that we're highlighting now this year with this program and trying to expand on a little bit, mostly to highlight the difference between monitoring and evaluation. So for monitoring, it's ongoing. We've talked about it in the past as post-project implementation. But really, we'd like you to start thinking about that ongoing assessment of whether or not your plan is is checking. So knowing what your plan, what you've outlined, and being able to assess it along the way gives you a really strong opportunity to make those changes that I talked about. So when things start to go not according to plan, then you can make those tweaks along the way to improve the project. So in our water supply example, monitoring is when, again, you're objectively looking at things having been taken care of according to your plan. So you're talking about funding was sent to the vendor. You've got materials purchased, hopefully not directly by you because you could get a better price through your NGO. So you want to have engaged them early enough that they can do your purchasing for you. They can deliver things, get everything to the site, prepare for your arrival. Are all those steps taken have they all taken place so that you can arrive and be the most effective that you can while you're there in country. And then the et cetera, I have that underlined because I think it really depends on your chapter how much you need to take care of, how much you need to plan, and how much you need to check that things are done along the way. I have some chapters who have weekly meetings with their community partners, and I have some who can't get a hold of them, remotely. So either via video conferencing, believe it or not, or some who can do conference calls and stay in better touch with their community. So you'll have an opportunity to check that things are going according to plan along the way, better than a chapter who maybe has once a month or once a quarter communication. So you might need a more detailed plan if you don't have as frequent communication. And then for evaluation, this step is where analysis comes in. So monitoring, as I said, is objective. The analysis component of evaluation really looks back at what has been done and starts to assess whether or not that work has been effective in achieving the goals that your community laid out. So you would do this to understand reasons for success or failure. You are going to be looking to communicate that success or failure to your donors or to others. And then also just to determine how well the funding has been used for the project. A lot of times you need to report in on that. So with our water supply project, that might look like, that you have built the distribution system, but is the community actually experiencing an increase in flow? You've trained some maintenance people, but do they really have the capacity to maintain the project into the future? And then just another, I'm just trying to drive this difference home. So between monitoring and evaluation, the difference is what you're looking at. So for monitoring, again, you're just looking at that activities you set out to do are done, but evaluation brings in that analysis, and you're really trying to determine if your objectives have been met. And the majority of this phase of our PMEL program is done by the chapters, and when you're there still actively involved and engaged in the program. So this is when a lot of the resolution happens. So you're going back to monitor and evaluate after implementation, and you can determine that there are some needs for enhancements to the project or additional training. This is our opportunity as an organization to get a lot of the resolution taken care of if there are problems. Okay, and then the EWB-USA headquarters is now incorporating this impact assessment level of review at that monitoring and evaluation phase. So this is still wrapped into the M and E of PMEL. And this is where we start looking at change. And the emphasis here, and unfortunately the words that I highlighted so that you would really get them, are the ones you can't see. So I'll just make note that what we're looking at are the good and the bad changes and the intended and unintended changes. So this isn't your chance to highlight only the positive outcomes that your chapter directly contributed to. This is your opportunity to really understand what's happened in the community. So it answers those so what questions. So, what has changed for whom? How significant is that change? And what can we learn from it? And so in our example, I think the key here to emphasize or highlight the difference between this and just straight evaluation is if we'd stopped at evaluation with our water flow example, we would think, okay, well the pipes are in and the flow is increased. But what we wouldn't have caught is that nobody's using that water system because either it tastes bad or maybe it's contaminated or somebody else came in with a cheaper option. So if we don't go back some years later and get a good sense of what exactly has changed, do they have an improved health situation, and then we can tease out, is that resulting from the fact that we just increased the flow, or is there somebody else who's come in, another NGO, and provided a cleaner water source or a cheaper one? So we need to kind of ask deeper questions. And then the last component of our new impact assessment program is the learning. And this is really where we can make significant improvements in our processes and also where you can kind of direct your project back on course. So this is where the thinking about all this stuff and actually putting it to use and doing something about it comes into play. And for us to really effectively learn from it, we're going to need to collect the data, which I'll get to how we're going to do that next. And then we'll have it organized. We need to make it accessible. So a lot of you have asked over the years for access to each other's reports, or at least to be put in contact with each other so you're not all reinventing the wheel along the way. So we want to make sure that this data that we're collecting is then accessible to you and to the public. And then we need strategies to incorporate that learning into our organizational processes. But again, I keep trying to highlight that you can do this at your project level too, your team level. So you can incorporate opportunities to plan, monitor, evaluate, and learn before you even get to how you're going to report all that to us. You need to be thinking about each of those steps for yourselves and in your own kind of organizational structure for the projects. So this, I'm just going to pause for a second. This is where a full description of this program is listed on the website. It's on the public side. You don't need to sign in for the full description of what we've got. And then I also needed to mention, so on the learning component, that's the final phase of the development of this program, and we just wrapped up that section of work, and so within the next month or two, that's going to be added to the website. So you'll get to see, that's been one of the frequently asked questions at these conferences, is how are we going to use this information and feed it back into the process. So that's forthcoming. And then this same talk, and probably more opportunity for detailed questions, is going to start to be offered as a live webinar twice a month. So Kathy mentioned earlier, we have technical webinars offered twice a month. This is one. And so you can register for those on the website now. Okay, so this is when all my turkey folks are going to wake up, I think, because you want to know how this is going to affect you. So we have asked you to monitor your work for at least 3 years now, and we have not provided you very much guidance. So today I want to go over some additional guidance we have. We have 5 or 6, depending on what you would call an update, new tools for you, and they're going to allow you to consistently document the work that you're doing and be able to learn from it on your own, and then also allow us to go back through and, like I said, consistently measure our impact across the organization, so regardless of your project type. So the first, this is where I mentioned our numbers. So we have this relationship with these 500 series of reports. You all know and love them, 521 through 527. And those are unchanged in terms of how often they're submitted or the deadlines that they're submitted on. But what we've added is we've pulled all this program level monitoring information. So all this talk about change and lessons learned and things like that out of those and put them into a 900 series. And that's not to say there's an accompanying 900 for every single 500. So just as you're looking at it, you'll start to identify here, I'm going to go through, that these are sections that had previously been in the 500 in a really ambiguous way, have now been pulled out, and we're asking really specific questions for you to answer and for us to be able to collect that data. So the timelines for submittals and all that are unchanged, and the 900 documents will all refer to the program level surveys. So the post-trip reports, this is where we have asked you for the past few years to report on 3 organizational metrics for success. And that's the functionality, is the project functional, is there a demonstration of knowledge transfer, and is there a demonstration of maintenance being done. And so again, we've provided a table, but other than that, it's been this kind of anecdotal discussion about what you've learned while you've been in the field. So what we've tried to do now, and what we have done, and hopefully you'll think it's helpful, is we've identified what the list of indicators are that you're going to use for your project type. And we have those feed directly into specific tables that ask about those metrics. So it's all organized for you. You just have to pick through a list of indicators, and it feeds right into how you can report on functionality, knowledge transfer, and maintenance. And I'll go over those in detail here in a bit. And then the 530 and 531, those are the same step for the same close of program trip. So you're still submitting those reports, but they now have a stronger emphasis on evaluation. And they hopefully provide you a lot better guidance on how to come up with an effective evaluation plan, and a little bit more clarity on how to relate the work you've done back to the community's goals. So here's the first of the 900 documents, and it's not even a report or form that you submit. It's a description of this fantastic new position that exists now in your chapter, and it's your #1 recruiting tool to get all those anthropologists and the public health people and everybody else on board, so that you can start creating these holistic teams to really get at the heart of this change data and really understanding what impact you're having. So I have thought about this position a lot like your health and safety officers. They don't necessarily need to be an engineer, although if you have a passion for it, like I do, then certainly volunteer for this role. But it's somebody who's really going to take this body of work, this component of your project work, and own it. And they are going to have either sat through this presentation today or participate in the online webinar that we'll host. And then they'll be responsible for really kind of spearheading this effort within your chapter and developing the tools and the community surveys and things that you'll use in the field. All right, so the 901 is the first document to really steer this study of impact. A lot of you, before I go into this one, a lot of you are beyond this point. So if you have an existing program right now, you are not going to be submitting a 901. This is for all of you with a new program kicking off. You're going to develop this baseline study and program plan, and so you'll see how this mirrors really closely with this new effort of planning and then monitoring, evaluating, and learning. So this is the planning step. And again, it asks you a series of really specific questions, trying to tease out what the community's goals are, how you might think about meeting them, how you can anticipate what barriers to success and what things will help facilitate success can be incorporated into your program work. And that 901 is submitted, because some of you are trying to keep track of new process changes. The 901 is submitted with the first post-assessment report in the program. And that's why I say a lot of you are beyond that phase. But the 901B is essentially an update to that. And even if you haven't done the 901, you can still submit, and you will still submit with your program reporting from now on, an impact monitoring report. And we've had a couple of chapters tackle this one already, and we've got great examples online. So under the example documents, under project process, you can find a good 901B example that really, and that chapter's been active for 4+ years. So there are some good tips on how to kind of slip right into this process and start collecting the data that we're looking for to measure this impact change. Okay, these two are the ones I think I've heard the biggest demand for. Well, maybe not, there might be one at the end. But the next two are the ones that chapters have been responding to our request for you to develop an agreement with your community or your local partners for the last few years. And every time we ask you to come up with what we were calling an MOU, you've come back to us and asked, well, what is our standard agreement format for this? So we finally have that. And the 902 is probably, again, it's at the early phases. So a number of you are beyond this phase. And the #1 question we get on this is, well, do we have to go back and renegotiate a contract with our NGO? Because I know that's not easy. So those of you who have something in place already will be grandfathered in. So you just need to be mindful that this is here and that this template will outline what we're looking for in an agreement with your community. This is exactly, these are the details that you need to have early on in the program. So this is after your first assessment trip again in the project. And it really just sets up managing expectations. So this is where we're getting at how you're going to communicate when you're here back in the States, what kind of plans, what kind of structure the community is going to set up for operations and maintenance, things like that. So nothing really specific yet. And what I do with my chapters is ask them to, or in the past, before we had these, is ask you to come up with some kind of an expectations agreement early on, and then add addendums as you get project-specific details worked out and the design is further developed. So this 903 serves in that function. This is something you would submit with your final design. So this goes to the TAC for review. And this is where you get into the community is going to submit or provide 10 people per day for 15 days for implementation labor. And this is also where we start to identify and document how much cash we and the community partners are going to contribute to the project. and any other responsibilities for material acquisition and operations and maintenance. All of this should be in the 903. Now, both of these are a template that we've provided, and everything in them needs to be included, but a number of you have worked out really effective MOUs after you get the community's input. So certainly, it's meant to be an agreement between all of you, and in that way, they'll need to provide input. They'll need to let you know what their expectations are of you as well. So on your assessment trip, make sure you have a way to get in touch with the community remotely and work through some of these details before you get it sent to TAC. Okay, so the 905 is the program's logical framework, and I just wonder how many of you have been exposed to that term or are familiar with either logical framework or log frame. Has anybody heard that before? Okay, just a couple people. I'm guessing, I would venture to guess, you might not be our engineers. Are you? Okay, yeah. So this is the predominant means of measuring international development work throughout the world. And we have not required them. They often come from this top-down, donor-driven approach to measuring the work that we're doing. I think, and there are some criticisms of using it. I think people who are stuck with it from the donor side feel really constricted by it. They think that it's a little bit too limiting. It doesn't allow for the nuances of the project really to come through. I think for our purposes, though, it can be a really effective tool for you to start just concisely describing what it is you want to do with this program, and then provide a means for verifying that you're doing that along the way. So just to describe it quickly, as you probably can't see it in the back, but it's a simple 4x4 matrix. Basically, it lists the community goals, the objectives, and the activities that you're going to need to carry out to meet that community goal. And I have an example on the next slide, so we'll walk through a little bit. And then the measures of the methods to measure that you're accomplishing those tasks. Okay, so this looks like a whole bunch of stuff. And I just want to, believe it or not, this one completed is where we're going to get to see the logic in action. So this is where it all comes together. This is back to our water project again. And the way you fill these out, I don't have a pointer, so I'm going to use this. Perfect, okay. So the way to start developing your logical framework is to start in the top left corner with the overall goal, and that comes from the community. So this one in particular is fewer incidents of waterborne illness. So we could take that was the community's goal. And as some of you might have experienced, when you dive into a program with that as your only charge, you can get kind of all over the map. The scope increases, and everybody has input on how you're going to meet the need to reduce waterborne illness. So then you need to start thinking through how you're going to tackle that. And so you take it down a notch to a specific outcome. And in this case, it's improved drinking water and sanitation facilities are going to exist in the community. So we figure if we can, in order to do that, then we need to implement water treatment infrastructure and latrines, and we need to train people on how to maintain them. And in order to do that, then we need to install a pump, install a distribution system, build the latrines, and train maintenance staff. So the way the logic works then, you go back up. So we start here in the bottom left, and we say if we've done those simple direct activities like installing a pump, and these assumptions over here in the right-hand column, assumptions like construction materials are of good quality, and trainees are actually going to participate in your training. Then you come back up to the next level and you can say that technicians are probably knowledgeable enough about the system requirements to maintain it. And water treatment infrastructure is going to exist, or going to be functional. And if that and the trainees actually do maintain the system, then you bounce back up again to improved drinking water facilities exist. And if those facilities exist and our assumptions that people are only using that source for drinking water hold true, then we can make some direct correlations between fewer incidences of waterborne illness and our input into the work, in our program involvement. So it's, this is done once. It's something to do at the beginning to help set a roadmap for how you're going to achieve the program's goals. So it's done early on in the program, and then, you know, if you need to update it along the way, then you update it. But it's an at-a-glance, one-page, quick understanding of the work you're doing and how you're going to measure it. And then the last new tool that I want to go over, I talked a little bit about earlier. So this is an example of our list of indicators. And organizations who do international development, and often a number of them all together, are bound by the same consistent set of indicators. And up until now, we've asked you to come up with indicators. We've pooled those together and listed them all by project type. So what you'll see now on this 906 are 7 tables, one for each project type. We've got water, for those of you who don't know, we've got water, sanitation, civil works, structures, information systems, energy, and agriculture. I think that's everybody. And so each one, we've identified indicators that we think would tell a consistent story across the board so we can start talking about our work as an organization. So this one here as an example is the energy set of indicators. And the way that this works into your reporting is, as I mentioned earlier, those post-trip reports have always asked you to write a paragraph or two about what indicators you're using, and then somehow come up with a percentage of functionality, or a yes/no on demonstrated knowledge transfer, a yes/no on whether or not maintenance is being done. And so now these are the specific questions you would use to fill in that table. What we're going to do is each table of indicators has 3 columns, and each column refers to one of those metrics of success, so functionality, maintenance, and knowledge transfer. And what you do is pick, sorry, I lost my marker. You pick 3 from each metric. So they're already there for you. And also before you ask, if you've been working in a long time in your community and you have indicators you know and love, you can keep using those. But we're going to ask you to start reporting on these. And you can report on the others. In every report, there's an opportunity for you to add more information if you need to document that for your future teams. But we need you to start reporting on these so that we can start to look consistently across the board at the work that we're doing. So this is an example of how it works. I've taken just the first column, so the functionality column of indicators, and from the energy side. So we're going to say we have a cook stove program. And I have selected the quality of indoor air, the number of families using only traditional methods for cooking fuel, and then the existence of cracks in a stove. Now you notice the indicators, they don't have any subjective analysis involved. They're not saying an improvement in the number of cracks in the stoves. It's just, you're just measuring whether or not there are cracks. Sorry, I don't have a laser here. When you pull those over into, this is a snippet of our project reporting, you just plop the 3 that you've chosen right into the table, and that becomes your monitoring plan. So you go out on your trip, you've selected quality of indoor air, maybe you have a means to measure whether or not there's X amount of contaminants in the air as a result of the project or after the project implementation. And then maybe out of 45 families, only 5 are using traditional fuel sources. Maybe there are small cracks present in 30 out of 45 stoves that you've implemented. So what that does, you take all that monitoring result and feed it right into the table that we've always had in our reports. So that's kind of the intention of how you can use these. You're going to pull the ones that we've already said, and are already indicated here, and you're going to feed them right into your table. And then this last one, this is just a project summary of the reporting. So nobody can read that. I can't even read it from here. But it's just to show you that what that looks like is very similar to the 500. It's just a one-page summary of everything that relates to the PMEL program reporting. So it talks about what you'd submit and when. And then it also talks about those resources that you don't submit, but when they're useful, when you tie that data back into the reports that you do submit. So again, we've asked you to include information on how you're measuring your impact for a few years, and we haven't given you that good guidance. And we're hoping that this provides the clarity that you need to be a little bit clear, more direct in determining the level of impact that you've had in your communities and how well you're meeting the community's stated goals. And then assessing both the project work, so the engineering work that you've done, and the overall change in the community, we think is going to allow all of us to speak more confidently about the work that we're doing. Again, this is the part I really wanted you to take away. You can't see it, but it's just a snapshot of when some of those new tools come into play in the existing reporting process. So I think you can probably pick up on that. And then all of our project process documents have been updated. They always updated each fall based on feedback from all of you. So that has been done. Everything that's on the website is new and current. And with all of those, as with all of those, these are going to be submitted, required, starting with a January deadline. But they're available now. And as I said, a lot of chapters have used them, and we've gotten good feedback on the guidance that they provide moving forward. And so this is the question slide, but the thing I wanted to highlight is down at the bottom. And it's that, we're new to this. So we have been monitoring in kind of a haphazard way for the last few years, and we have some good data, but in this really structured, organized way, this is a new effort for us. So we know a lot of you have studied it or learning about it in school or through other organizations, and we have a feedback forum on our website. We want to make sure it's as best as it can be. So go to the My EWB site, so you'll need to log on. And then there's one of our news items is to ask you to provide input into the program once you've had a chance to look through it. So that's there for you as well. And this is how to stay in touch with us on social media. And that's all I have. And I do have about 15 minutes, so if anybody wants to get a little bit more, I'm happy to answer questions. Yeah. I think they're on.
It's on? Well, I have a lot of questions. I think this is great. I really appreciate it. And I don't want to get hung up in all the details here, so you stop me right away if I am. So the log frame, and then the next one was measuring your outputs, your one set of outputs and then two outputs.
So which, you want to go over this one?
This log frame makes sense. And then the next slide.
Yeah. Or the log frame
one
slide?
you're looking for. Yeah, the next one.
Okay, got it.
Yeah. One set of outputs and then two outcomes. Those two go together. So those outcomes are supposed to fit into the log frame.
Well, right, so I probably could have gotten away with not including outputs and outcomes under the headings there, but I wanted to try to demonstrate that that's how we're addressing things at each level in our example log frame. So just to say, generally speaking, that EWB-USA is measuring, these are indicators that relate directly back to outputs in the first column. And then outcomes are the second two columns. So as we look at the log frame, the middle two columns, I didn't go into too much detail, but the first one is objectively verifiable indicators, and that's where you're going to put indicators that relate to each kind of row of activities. So down here at the bottom, and the second one, the indicators that are in that first column of our indicators list should speak to expected results and activities accomplished. The indicators in our far right, the demonstration of maintenance and demonstration of knowledge transfer, should speak to outcomes up here and the overall goal. So it's just they are a way of tying them back together, but it probably is misleading, a little too direct at a time. Anybody else? Sure.
So the suggested MPL lead, is that for the chapter as a whole or for each program?
So I envision it for each program. The question was, is the PMEL lead for the chapter as a whole or each program? And I think if you start to dive into the specifics of your program and how you're going to measure it, it's going to get very program specific pretty quickly. And so, but it's funny, I've heard from a few chapters now, well that means we've got, because I have on here that they would travel. And that means we've got another person on the travel team. And that often comes from chapters who are huge and are always begging us for more things for those extra members to do, the members who can't travel all the time, something for them to do and focus on. So similar to like your professional mentor teams or your project leads even, your health and safety officers, we have that somebody focused on that needs to be on the travel team. It's not always going to be that same person. So it's not that there's one PMEL lead for the chapter and now they're traveling on every single program's teams. But some representative who has their mind's eye on this effort needs to be on each travel team so that we're getting good community participation as we collect all this data. Yeah?
Hi, can you explain again about the 902 and the 903 tables seem to focus on the agreement with the community and when would you have the community sign that agreement, those two agreements?
Perfect. Okay, so the question is the difference between the 902 and the 903 and when the community would sign each of these agreements. The difference really comes down to timing and how much you know about your work at the time that you're working on these agreements. So the first one, the 902, is after your first assessment trip is when you would submit it. So on that first assessment trip, you're convening with your community partners and your community leaders, your community, like your NGO or your municipality, and the community leadership to establish expectations. I've always just casually said we're going to all work together to improve water in the community. That's how I've referred to it in the past. Now we have this template, but that's basically what it gets at. It's pretty general, and it commits everybody to some expectations management, just making sure that everybody knows what their role is moving forward and how to communicate. And then the 903 is right before implementation, and by then you've got all the design worked out. So that's where you can include details about who's contributing what and who's going to pick you up at the airport if it needs to be that detailed, things like that. And this is submitted with your 525, so with your final design. And we've had a lot of the TAC reviewers ask for that final MOU. So chapters have in the past said, well, we'll get it signed when we get there for implementation. And the problem is with that there's always a surprise. And so if the community is surprised by what you've come up with in your MOU here, or if you arrive expecting materials to be delivered and the community didn't have that understanding, then we've missed an opportunity. There's usually a week of fuddling around trying to get materials on site to start building. So this now is intended to be signed. It could be remotely. We could get an email confirmation, but somehow you and the community have to have these details worked out before you go to TAC, so that we know things are ready for you when you get there. So it really comes down to timing. That's the difference between these two.
I know you talked about how you're doing the learning step and you're collecting data to be published on sort of a national scale instead of us trying to get it in piecemeal. Is this going to function much the same way where you can start hitting the ground running in terms of collecting data and maybe send it out in an e-blast like every other month, or what's the benchmark for publishing the effect that you're going to be studying throughout these 900 reports?
Right. Jen, I think if I could just paraphrase, the question is, how are you guys going to get the learning that we learn from all this, right? How are we going to disseminate that out to all of you? And that's that learning bit that's going to be fully developed in the next couple months. The sneak preview is, our intention is to do, and I will not get into a lot of the details of the different phases of impact assessment, but our intention is to do impact reviews annually on some scope of programs. So you're submitting data while you're active, but once you close that program, that kind of triggers another level of review on our part, and we start to accumulate a number of programs that are ready for kind of a closeout impact review. And those will be done annually, so maybe we would divide them up like water programs in Guatemala or all of our Kenya programs together. That's the part that still needs to be worked out, is how we're going to strategize getting those, the analysis done. And then every impact review would have a resulting report that we would put up on the website and on the public side so that everybody could see what we're doing. We're also looking into right now some software where the data can be gathered real time by anybody who is visiting the communities. We can get quicker updates, so it's not just an annual thing. So anytime you go, you might provide another paragraph or a photo or something of the status of that project. And so that's super exciting, and we're hoping that that might be part of the 2014 rollout of sharing the data that we're collecting. Any others? Okay, thank you very much.
Tiffany's talk. Thank you, Tiffany. I just had one quick announcement. There was a lost Padfolio, some information left in the Massachusetts room. So if you'd like to claim that, just see me afterwards. Quick run through of what we have left for today. The networking session is happening now. After the next speaker, we'll be having our poster display, and there will be snacks available. We'll have 2 breakout sessions, a break, and then the Zimmerly Art Museum. I'd like to introduce our next speaker. His name is Scott Minos. He's currently working for the Department of Energy. He will be speaking about the different impacts on our engineering projects that we do in these communities. So as you know, they're sustainable engineering projects, and Scott will be talking about the non-engineering aspects, such as social, economical, and cultural, talking about the sustainability of these impacts throughout their duration. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce Scott Minos.
Good afternoon, everyone. I've been with Engineers Without Borders for 3 years now, and I really continue to be amazed by really just all the work that all of you do. I am not an engineer by trade, nor by training, nor by talent, for that matter. And so I've really come into engineering completely from the back door, not from how most of you. I don't really do engineering, but getting into these projects really has been interesting. And let me just say that from what I've seen from my students in my chapter, the kind of work that they do in the field in very difficult circumstances, and without having yet graduated, the work that all of you will be able to do, if you're doing the same caliber of work in the same kind of environment, by the time you're out there in the field, that engineering you're going to be doing out there is going to be simple compared to what you're doing here. It's a wonderful way to get into your fields, to learn engineering, and to get your chops and to really learn how to do this. And so I really applaud all of your efforts and wish that I had that kind of not only talent but insight when I was your age. I really applaud all of the work that you're doing. The work that Engineers Without Borders does is really, quite fantastic. And however, engineering, like any other profession, often can really be, many people can begin focusing so much on their own area that it almost seems like it's existing in a vacuum. But engineering does not exist in a vacuum. It has real world implications. And my having come into all of this work, not being an engineer, I think by showing some of the case studies that I've been involved with, may enlighten you a little bit about how your projects really affect people in ways that you don't really realize. And it may give you a little bit more insight into how to approach your projects in the future. And it's certainly part of my hope. Just a little bit about me. I am in the U.S. Department of Energy. I work on renewable energy and energy efficiency. And I got into engineering and international development specifically through kind of a backdoor, as I said. What happened for me is that we had the Discovery Channel come and visit one day, and they said, we noticed that you've been throwing a lot of money at these renewable energy projects in the rural areas of the developing world. And we'd like to do a wonderful presentation about this, like to put together a documentary. And my supervisor thought this was the greatest thing in the world, and I was standing backwards, behind the people, just kind of shaking my head. My eyes were really wide. I'm like, no, no, no. And these people left, and he agreed to do it. And after they left, he said, why were you so adamant about not doing this? And I said, have you heard anything about these projects? And he said, well, no. And I said, well, you just agreed to have the Discovery Channel go and highlight projects we know nothing about. It could be the difference between a documentary and a 60 Minutes piece, right? And I didn't want to be, I do communications, and I didn't want to be responsible for that. So this is starting to give out on me, I hope it doesn't. He began to panic, and he said, I want you to go over to Africa and look into these things right away. So sent me over there. I knew nothing about engineering, and I got thrown into the bath water. And I began really, hence this was the beginning of my engineering work, as it were. And I really learned to love it, wouldn't look back. But a lot of what I've learned along the way in these projects are that they're really a nuance. And there's a lot of things that go into it sustainability-wise. Sustainability was really not a word back then. We weren't really using that word. But if you look at the mission and the vision of EWB, sustainability is written all over it. And it's really a very important thing. Part of sustainability is engineering, in a way, because engineering is the catalyst for a lot of the work. But it really deals with economics, the environment, and deals with social equity. So that's a lot of what I'm going to be showing about these projects. So the first thing I want to say is that the work you're doing is real world work. It impacts people. It really does impact people. And to the extent that, and I hope you realize that, I think it was Socrates that was talking about the center of the universe. And what he said was this. He said that the center of the universe is every person in the world. Every person is the center of their own universe. And I like to think back to that because many times what I hear my students saying in my chapter are that people look at the world differently. They have different viewpoints. They don't have different viewpoints. They have different realities. You're dealing with people's real lives here. And when you leave and you leave the project and you don't come back for a while, people are stuck with what you've done there. Okay? And you are affecting their real work. So really what I hope all of you realize is put yourself in their shoes. And if you had other people impacting your life and the way you live, you'd want them to do a good job as well. And really think about the kind of ways that you are working. We in the United States, we have a different way of life than most people. All right? We don't see the impacts of food production nor energy production. You all just had lunch not long ago. How many of you even thought about where that food came from? You did. A couple of you. Good. How many chickens were strangled, or how many animals have died? But do you know where that food came from? This thing is really dying. If there's a better mic, it would be appreciated. And how many of you are thinking, or even know, how many of you know where the energy in this room is coming from today? many of you even know where the energy in this room comes from today? Anybody? Anybody from Rutgers or any of the local schools? Nobody knows. We don't think about that because it's not stuff that comes. It's not stuff that comes naturally to us. So we don't really think about this, but when you're in the developing world, guess what? You have to think about those things because they're evident. They're right in front of you every day. You know where your food comes from, you know where your energy comes from, and you know what the consequences of them are. So let me ask you, what if today, and I really want you to go with me on this, I want you to be serious about this for a moment, if at all possible. This is better. Thank you very much. I really want you to think about this in all sincerity, okay? Try to be serious about this. Instead of me being here today, what if a little space alien was invited to come and talk to you, little ET here? And ET said, you know, our people have been looking at you from afar for quite a while. And we noticed something. You don't have a little thing that we have. It's called the orb. I don't know how many of you can see the orb here. But everybody has the orb. Everyone. It's a matter of our life. And in fact, it's so much a part of our life that we don't even notice it. It's not even something we think about. It's way in the background, but everybody has it. It makes our life easier. And we wanted to bring you the orb. Here you go. Bye. And ET takes off. Now what? Who wants the orb? Anybody? Who knows what? One person? Who knows what to do with it then? How would you approach even this? I asked this one time to a classroom, and a young lady says, well, I stick it with a stick. I said, good, the scientific method, nothing like that. What would you do with the orb? But it's a serious question. What happens is the reverse all the time. And I'll give you a good example. My very first trip that I made, and I was really green at this, was to Uganda. And I went there and I had an audience with the First Lady of Uganda. She pulled us in and she wanted to know all about what we were doing in our country. And as a matter of friendship, because she's a patron of many of the charities in her country, I said, we'd like to go and do a solar installation of any of your charities throughout your country. You just name it, we'll go do it. And she said, well, I'd like you to go out and do one for the pygmies. How many of you have done work in Uganda? Anybody? Yeah. Have you gone out to far western Uganda? No? Far western Uganda is where the pygmies are. We were going to be out somewhat that way, so we said, of course we'd go and do that. Well, it wasn't but 3 days later, there I was, a giant among men, might I say, at 5'5", but there I was with a bunch of pygmies. And it was explained to them that we were bringing them this gift. We had come on a flying plane from very far away. We were bringing them this thing. And they didn't know us from Adam. Half of us had not even seen white people. So here we are climbing on their main center hut where they meet, the community meets, and we're putting up solar panels. And we're putting in lights. And when it came time to turn on the lights, everybody who was over, they were grousing by then, their furrowed brows and everything. They wanted to see what we were doing. They had come in, they watched, I turned on the lights, and they scattered like rats off a ship. I never saw anything like it. Ran for the hills. In fact, they ran so far that people were going out the windows and the whole hut was shaking. I thought maybe something like a cobra got in the hut or something. I'm looking around, and I said, what gives? And some of the people went and talked with some of the leaders who were very angry. And they said, well, some of our people who've never even seen white people, let alone lights, think that the light is what has made you Caucasian. And they don't want to look like you. They ran pretty far. We were told to take those down immediately. I don't think I have to, it doesn't take a genius to figure out what went wrong here. But what is the big thing that went wrong? There are many things that are wrong with this project, okay? And I admit, I was really green at this and just said, sure, we'll go do that, why not? What's the big thing that's wrong with that? The big thing is, nobody asked for it. That tribe didn't ask for that. Pygmies didn't ask for it. They have enough things. They have enough things. They're happy with their life. They didn't want that. They didn't know what to do with it. Nobody asked for it. Okay? And I think that a lot of what we do in these projects, and what I hope that all of you do with your projects, is that the first thing is be open to what people are asking for. Doesn't mean you have to accept it, and there's a lot of questions you have to ask that are more basic, but be open to it. Now, SWEDO, any of you know that acronym, SWEDO? It's stuff we don't ask for, and it's a common acronym in the developing world. There's a project it has something to do with engineering, but I really want to point it out. Because here's a perfect example of stuff people don't ask for, but are pushed on them. Some well-meaning person had decided he wanted to get a million shirts to people in Africa. And then there was very soon after another initiative to get a million pairs of shoes to people in Africa. But what is the problem with this? Well, first, I like the saying down here, is that just because you have a really large hammer doesn't mean that everything in the world is a nail. Just because you may have access to a million shirts, or you can get access to a million shirts, or you want to get access to a million shirts, doesn't mean that every solution is shirts, or shoes, or what have you. One of the big problems with a project like this is if you, when you begin thinking about it, if you dump a million free shirts, maybe there's a little bit of a more sustainable, and there's that word again, sustainable way to do this. Maybe you could contract with people locally, and you could stimulate a local economy in the process. If you're really wanting to get shoes to people who don't have shoes, there's a sustainable way to do this, rather than just dumping a bunch of shoes or shirts onto a local economy. The other problem with dumping a bunch of shoes or shirts onto a local economy is you destroy the economy. If you don't want to stimulate the economy, don't blow it up, don't sabotage it. If you put in a bunch of shirts or a bunch of shoes, what happens is you put the people who sell shoes and shirts out of business. You put people who repair shoes and shirts out of business. You destroy an economy that's not sustainable economically. There's an economic impact of something that people don't really think about. It's really important to think about how you're going to impact an economy by putting in your engineering works. Now, this is not an engineering work, okay? But really, when you start thinking about economies, the things that's important is, yes, people need shoes, yes, people need shirts. But really, all you accomplish here is addressing shoelessness or shirtlessness, not poverty. Poverty is addressed by jobs, okay, and many other things. And I'm going to be talking about that a little bit later in the breakouts. Think deeper about how you're going to impact somebody's life, how you're going to impact their economy. So here's an example with engineering. I went to India. I was working with a women's co-op, and we got a lot of money from a private investor who wanted to give money to a women's co-op in India and to give them lighting so that they could, these women work together and they live together. And he wanted to put lighting in where they lived, and we came there with solar panels and with lights to do this. And she said, well, we knew about this gift, but we really don't want the lights. And we said, well, why is that? And without understanding the Hindi religion, what I could get from this is they pray to a goddess named Lakshmi, who at night looks for candles in their windows. And those candles have prayers attached to them, as I understand it. And Lakshmi looks for those and throughout the night and collects those candles and those prayers. If you have lights that are going on, Lakshmi will not see the prayers and the candles. So for these women, they did not want the lights in their homes or in their business. Okay, fair enough. But I had a bunch of solar panels. So my thought was, why don't we power some of their industry? Why don't we get some of that industry going? And so I put in some of the solar panels. We got it powered up. I had some extra inverters. I had some big battery banks that I could dedicate to this. And we got these going up. They had sewing machines they didn't use, electric sewing machines, electric looms, things of that nature. The donor was furious. Why would the donor be furious? Because something we didn't anticipate. We just ruined their economy. We ruined their economy because what made their product valuable, which was a textile, What made it valuable was that it was homemade. And we just completely, with one swipe, just completely ruined it. Completely ruined it. It was totally not intentional, but there it is. You have to be very careful in doing your assessments. Economics plays a very big part in it. We were well-intentioned, but it didn't go right. We did the very same thing on a different project, but it worked out completely different. And I'll tell you why, because in this case, it was sustainable. We were also asked to go from a university to their agricultural research station, out in the middle of nowhere. And this agricultural research station was devoted to growing and understanding and looking at bananas. And it was a big research station, actually. Lots of people were living there and conducting research. And what they wanted us to do was put in lights in the dormitories. That is exactly what they were supposed to do. Most of these people, and the dormitories were rather extensive, but most of these people came from areas that didn't have lights. They never had lights before. They didn't need them now. They sheepishly asked us, they said, could you put lights in where we do our studying, in the common room, so we could all work together and study and we could have classes at night? Sounded reasonable. That would enable something. Then they asked, they said, could we maybe also have a light outside? And I said, well, why would you want that? So we could walk outside, would scare away animals, we could see where we're going. Sort of made sense. Then they said, what about in our chicken coops? I said, well, why would you want to give the chickens that if you not yourself? It keeps them up all night, makes them get fat, you get a lot more money for them, more meat on them, if we're going to eat them, and they lay more eggs. Okay. We sat there and they gave us all these wonderful reasons about where to put lighting or how to put in power, as opposed to the short-sightedness of what the people initially asked for. The people who put in the ask were not the people who were going to be affected. They were university administrators somewhere in the capital city. But here we were, and we did this, and it worked out wonderfully. And we've gone back to see the fruits of our labor, and it really has turned out wonderful. The difference is we were able to determine that that was going to be sustainable. We didn't ruin an economy, we created one. And there is the reason, and that's the kind of thing you want to look for in your projects. That's the kind of things you want to enable and you want to empower. Those are the kind of success stories that you really want to create. Now, the very first thing I looked, remember I told you about my supervisor said, get over to Africa, look into these things, and make sure there's no problems. One of the ones I did, very first place I ever landed in Africa was Senegal. And I looked into a bunch of projects we did there. And one of them, anybody do anything in Senegal? No? One of them was a water pump. And the women in this village were having to walk 3.5 kilometers each way to get water. Not unusual, but to make life much easier, they put in a water pump in this area. Okay? We went there and the thing was completely demolished. And I don't mean kind of demolished, I mean it was smashed to bits. Anything that had existed there no longer existed. We tried to figure it out. And so I was very insistent. I said, we'll have it back it up and running and don't worry. And the women are like, ah, don't worry about it, it's okay. Just don't worry about it, just go away. And they kept saying, don't worry about it, don't worry about it. And I was wondering, kept looking at this. And I wouldn't let it die. And finally, in an interview in the community, I got a woman off to the side. I was talking to her. She said, we don't want that. And I said, well, why don't you want it? Your only potable water is, 3.5 hours or 3.5 kilometers away. She said, it's the only part of our day where we get away from the drudgery of housework. It's a time where we women can go and talk. We're alone with our children. We don't have husbands on us who aren't doing anything in the home. And frankly, half of the women are being beaten. These women are getting away from drunken, beating husbands and are having time to themselves. Who knew? So then I looked into it and I wanted to see who asked for this pump. The men in the village, of course. Why did they ask for it? And more time that the women could be doing work. Okay? How many of you ladies would stand for that? Okay? Here's a social equity issue. And something that really, really requires a great amount of interviewing and in your community. to prevent things such as this. You need to do this to everybody in the community, equitably, without question, women and children included. Get out there and understand what the community is doing, not just the people who are asking for whatever projects are going on. It's very, very important. This is an interesting and one of the most unusual and fun stories I ever had. The Discovery Channel, we finally went and we began working with them. And it was a wonderful thing to do. And the very first thing we did with them was we created a satellite cable effort in the school. Put up satellite cable so they could have access to cable television and they could use it in their school. They could watch all sorts of educational television, this, that, and the other. We also put up a computer lab. Took a lot of work, took a couple days to put this in. When it was finally in, I gathered everybody, we all gathered everybody in this big room, and we wanted to show them television. Most of them had not ever seen TV. They're very, very remote. This is in the middle of Uganda in Queen Elizabeth Park, in the middle of the park. A very large school. So I turned it on. Of course, I turned it to Discovery Channel, turn it on there, and they start watching it. They said, and the very first show was about cheetahs. I said, well, here's a show all about cheetahs. And you can watch this show, and it'll teach you everything about cheetahs that you ever want to know. So I had a teacher kind of raise his hand, kind of quizzically, and he said, we're in the middle of Queen Elizabeth Park. We see cheetahs all the time. What's this thing going to tell us that, that nature doesn't show us? I said, well, all right. I go, but in a half hour, it'll show you something about crocodiles. I said, we have crocodiles. Go, well, it'll show you about kangaroos. There's something you don't have here. Not convinced. Okay, so I turned the channel. The next channel that pops up is Weather Channel International. Remember, like it was yesterday. So I said, well, this channel will tell you the weather. It's 86 and sunny. What do you mean it tells us the weather? It's going to change the weather? I said, well, it'll tell you the weather tomorrow. Okay, we got to be here no matter what it is, right? It'll tell you the weather somewhere else in the world. I ain't going nowhere. Okay. I was losing this argument really, really fast. So I kept changing the channels. I finally turned to somebody from the embassy. I said, they don't get it. And he said, no, Scott, you don't get it. You're a couch potato. He said, you're turning a village into a couch potato village. And it just froze me in my tracks. And I realized, looked out, and I just saw all these faces looking back at me, really eager to watch this TV, but not getting much of it. So I kept going through these channels, not convincing anybody of anything. Now, most of you are too young to get the reference. I get that. For those of you who don't, you'll love it. But finally, somebody raised their hand and they said, how do we watch Dynasty on this? Dynasty is an old soap opera that played at night, horribly trashy, full of these people who were very, very wealthy, drove around Rolls Royces, had private jets. Couldn't imagine. I was 2 hours off any road, and somebody asked me how to watch Dynasty. And so I said, how do you know about Dynasty? He said, everybody knows about Dynasty. We want to watch it to see how Americans live. Well, I don't know about you, my Rolls is in the shop, but it occurred to me, not only was I changing the society, the social nature of this, what we were really being asked to do through the money that was being given through UNESCO to do this project was to enable people to have enough technology that they could stay in their communities and live a better life, but without changing their society and their culture. We weren't doing that. We were changing their culture, turning them into couch potatoes, getting them hooked on American TV so they would want to come to America and live a lifestyle that doesn't really exist. Well, it exists for maybe the top 1%, right? Problem, right? But what is the answer to this? What would you do? I'll tell you what we did. We went back and we said, okay, this is fine. Does it mean we throw the baby out with the bathwater? Doesn't mean that. Sometimes you make a mistake in things, and that's okay. But we went back and we said, okay, we're not going to have open access to all these channels. We're going to have cable in the classroom. Okay, most of you grew up with cable in the classroom, right? Only educational programs that are on demand. And we're going to determine what the programs are. It's worked better. Not perfect. We're still assessing a lot of these things. However, don't give up on your stuff if you implemented something and it turns out wrong. You need to constantly assess your systems. Constantly assess your programs. But as you do it, you're going to find that you've made mistakes. Don't throw your hands up and say, okay, this is the end. You can change things. You can correct things. It's not the end of the world. But don't look at it just to see whether or not the engineering thing that you put in, whatever it is working. See what the impact is economically and socially. And that's really very important. Sometimes doing nothing is something. Sometimes that's the answer. I just came back last year from Fiji. My group was going to do a project in Fiji. Tough gig, right? Beautiful area and everything. Totally unsustainable project. But it was an assessment trip. And it looked good on paper, but when we got there, we started asking the right questions, fell apart really quick. My students were really upset with me. I never gave them the answer, and for those of you who are mentors, I encourage you to do what I do. And that is to lead your students into the understanding of why the project is or is not bad. Let them come to their conclusions. Guide them. Educate them. And I did. They were very upset. But I said, look, and I encourage you, some of you are going to go into assessments that aren't going to work out. Don't be upset by it. It's an assessment. If you're doing an assessment trip, the project is not yet formed. And sometimes the answer is no. And that's an important answer to have. It's better to find out early than to find out late after lots and lots of money. When you're into these communities, they are already in need. There's an answer. I mean, that's a given. The thing about it is you want to move from the old story, their need, and you want to begin moving to a new story. And you want to do that by talking with them, preparing them, visioning them for what can be. Often they may not know what they can have. They may not understand what you can do or what you're capable of. But it's up to you, the students, you, the group, to help envision them. Okay, you do this by beginning, I don't know if you can read all this, but just simply begin with questions. You're going to have questions, they're going to have questions. When you start doing this, the cogs turn. You begin with this question, and then community begins, because conversations begin. That's where the community and the trust begin between all of you, and then you begin to awaken people through civic engagement. That's where you all of a sudden understand what the possibilities are. But begin by asking these questions. When you do that, you begin to create alternative futures. And no matter where you start on this gyre, no matter where you start on it, it begins self-perpetuating. You begin coming in a little bit on the fringes, but then the closer you get into the circle, the faster it begins going. Okay? And the more perpetual it is. It begins turning and it's perpetual, which is what? Sustainable. Okay? And this is a sustainable model of beginning to talk and to communicate. There is such a thing as sustainable communication. That is what this is. Your communication has to be as sustainable as your project. One thing I do encourage you to do in looking to gain community buy-in on anything that you're doing is looking at these, what are called weapons of influence. Cialdini is a great professor in communications. All of these things are ways to get buy-in from large groups of people. Reciprocity. Enough said. Commitment and consistency. People will stick to commitments they make in public. This is important because if you want that community to buy into the project that you're doing, if they're going to maintain it, if they're going to, whatever it is that they're going to be doing, building it, helping to build it, whatever, if they're going to be doing that, you want that commitment to be made publicly and amongst everybody. It's very, very important. People will do what others do. That's another reason why you want that to be made publicly. Authority. Make sure you have the right authorities there that people want to, that people will follow. Does that always mean that it's the highest, chief in a village or elected official, whatever? Not necessarily. It could be your NGO if they have a lot of trust with the community. It could be anybody. I'll give you a funny example. I worked many, many years on electric vehicles, on hybrid vehicles in their infancy. And when hybrid vehicles came out, they didn't really have a big bang at first. Okay? I would go out, many of my colleagues would go out, and we would be pushing this. The assistant secretary would go out pushing it. The assistant secretary of Energy Efficiency, Renewable Energy, that's an authority figure, right? Who would say he is? It's not really. A lot of people don't even like the government. Okay? Could be an anti-authority figure, maybe, in some cases. You know when electric vehicles took off? Leonardo DiCaprio drove one to the Academy Awards. That's what saved the Prius. I kid you not. That is the thing that drove Prius sales and saved hybrid vehicles. Leonardo DiCaprio is an authority figure because he is a person that will get other people to do something. And that's what you want to seek in communities. It's not necessarily the person with the power. It's an authority figure. People are more influenced by those they like, and people are desiring something that's scarce. That will be, that doesn't really necessarily apply in our case because wherever you're going, chances are people will accept whatever you're going to give them most of the time. Not stuff that they don't want, remember Sweeto. But the answer is almost always, do you want A? And the answer is going to be yes. All right. Also this, something called TIME, targeting, informing, motivating, and empowering. Please keep these in mind also. It's very important to target the right people and the actions appropriate for them, informing them about their energy technologies. They need to know how to run these things. Somebody was talking about, I can't remember who it was, about circuit riders this morning. Do any of you know what circuit riders are? They go around through communities and keep technologies going. I'm not a big fan of circuit riders, and I'll tell you why. Your people, your project, your community, they have to commit to your project. Can't loan it off on some circuit rider. They have to clean the solar panels. They have to maintain the water pump. If they're not doing it, it's not worth for them to do it. You have to question whether or not it's worth you putting in. That's my opinion. But that's one reason why I don't like circuit riders. You want to motivate people and also definitely empower them. You want to empower them through education. The technical area there is very, very important. You want to empower them. Many people probably think, oh, I can't possibly maintain a solar system. I'm a moron when it comes to that sort of thing. Okay, I'm about as technical as nothing. I can do it. If I can do it, anybody in the third world can, trust me. What do you want from me? Okay, I know some of these titles are kind of cheeky and it's on purpose. What do you want from me? One thing I think that's always very important for you to do is to set up what you expect, not only from the community, but from your NGOs. Very, very, very important, because that you will get sustainability that way. And lastly, I just want to say that there's going to be a lot of perceptions of you in the world going out there. People are going to have a lot of different perceptions of you. So I titled, just who do you think you are? And it's a very good question. Who do you think you are? I can tell you that who you think you are is not how you're going to be, it's not who people in the developing world think you are. You're going to be perceived by a bunch of, and I don't know if you can see that over there, but those are sticky notes. Think of yourself covered with sticky notes with all sorts of labels. That is you. That's us in normal life anyway. But when you go into the developing world, you're going to have labels you never expected. And they may not be labels that really pertain to you. People are going to make a lot of assumptions about you. And as such, you're going to be representing, yes, a lot of things that are real. You're going to be representing EWB, your university, your country. But you're also going to be representing things such as your religion, even though it may not be your religion. But people are going to assume you're Christian, even though you may not be. They're going to assume a lot of things about you. Whatever the assumption is, you have a lot of responsibility to take those labels on and be responsible with them. And I can't stress that enough. But it really is very important. And the reason it is important, because your success in that community is going to depend on that. How many of you have been in the Peace Corps? A few of you. Some of you probably know this story, maybe some of you don't. And one person I can already tell does because of the title of this, and Isaac Peace Corps. But there's a story about a young man who goes to a village, and this guy thinks he's everything, okay? He's all that. He's going to go in here and save this village. And he arrives in the village. They meet him, and as a custom in the village, they've spread out a lot of food. They're ready to do a big presentation. They're going to have dancing. They're going to do lots of wonderful things. Really great. It's all set up. And they come, and the first thing they present him is this big banana leaf. So he takes the banana leaf, he puts it on the ground, he sits on it, he folds his legs, and he's ready for the presentation. Nothing happens. Everybody looks at him startled. He's sitting in his dinner dish. Now, if you had somebody come to your house and say, I know you need a lot of renovations done, you can trust me, I know what I'm doing. You say, well, let's have some lunch first, I got some lunch ready, why don't you just join me before you begin work? And he sits in his dinner dish. How many of you would trust him to do any work on your house? Anybody? Why would these people trust him anymore? What you know about these people, or what you invest in knowing about them, and the more you respect their cultures, and the more you come to understand them, and the more you realize that you're wearing a lot of responsibilities and a lot of labels, the more you're going to go in that village, be receptive to their ways, to their centers of the universe, to their understanding of how things should be, and the more that you're going to get buy-in from them. And you're going to be in this for the long haul. I can guarantee you this gentleman went through 2 years of heck. Okay? He didn't get very far in that community at all. He was ostracized. Okay? You don't want your project to fail from the beginning just because of perceptions. Be very careful of perceptions. It's really, really very important. Just a few things. Recruiting students, professors, and non-academic professional advisors. It's been said, and I know many of you know it, don't just recruit engineers. For the love of God, go out and get people from all walks of academic life, okay? Depending on your project, depends on the kind of people you need. But engineers are very, very valuable, of course, you know a lot, but there are people that are going to know about other things that are going to inform your project. And your project could very well fail, even though it may be engineering-wise sound. It could very well fail because you did not include people who are in education. If you're building a school, accounting for keeping track of everything that you do, economics, if you're building a hospital, medicine, whatever. Go out and get these people, incorporate them. They're going to inform your decision-making, and you'll be a much better, more robust, better rounded club for it. In addition, go out and establish partnerships. I'm very proud to say my organization has really been aggressive with this. We have the ambassador of Panama on our team, the ambassador of Panama. I meet with him regularly. He's a great guy. Airlines, for wherever you're flying, see if they can help you in any way. Engineering firms, not just here. If you're going somewhere, meet with an engineering firm on the ground where you're going. They're going to know about the land, the water, laws that are important. Go and seek out engineering firms while you're there. Seek out engineering schools if they're there. They are very important, and they're going to be more than willing to help you. In fact, try to get some of their professors to be advisors as well. Local charities, you have to do that, but go beyond just the ones you need to. Manufacturers of solar panels or whatever else you need. Talk to manufacturers. Talk to people who can ship those products. And talk to civic organizations in your college hometown. All of these are invaluable partnerships that I have had dealing with my EWB chapter. And I think that you'll find a lot of that will be also very valuable. However, don't make the partners do all the work, especially on the ground. Once again, make your community do the work. Make certain your project is involved, the community is involved in the project, because they have to have skin in the game. They have to be the ones that are doing the work, okay? Also, if you find that your community is not doing the work, I've said this before, it's a good indication that the project is waning for some reason and needs your intervention. Last but not least, I have to admit, I don't know. This title is because of the rapper 50 Cent. I have to admit, I have no idea who that is. I'm kidding. But 50 Cent did something funny, and I want to warn all of you against it. He went to Somalia recently, and he has an energy drink, apparently. And what he did was he recently did a thing. He said, if I get 1 million likes for my energy drink, I'll donate 1 million meals for people in Somalia. And if I get 2 million by the end of, and I don't know what the time frame was, but I think it was a week, he said he would double that to 2 million. Okay? Sounds reasonable. What's wrong with this? Okay, he can afford this, all right? And no doubt he's budgeted for it. He's holding his people that he's going to help ransom. He says, basically, I'll help them if you give me money, okay? Be very careful how you go out and you scurry up money for these projects. You don't want to hold the people you're helping ransom and say, we'll help them if you give us some money. We'll help them. Now, in some cases, you're going to need money to help them, and that's a little bit of a different issue. But be very careful how you approach that and how you do things. It really is considered not very advisable to be approaching things in such a way that what you're saying is you're withholding help unless people help you first, especially in this community that you're wanting to do. I put this last slide up, and I mean this when I say it. If any of you have any questions about anything that I presented here or that are going to be in my next presentation, anything about any of this or about my local chapter, you may feel free to contact me. I am on the taxpayer dole. It is my responsibility to get back in touch with you, and I will do so, I promise. So with that having been said, on behalf of Florida State University Engineers Without Borders and the U.S. government, thank you all for your time. Is there anything that I can do to answer your questions? No questions? Yes?
You might want to try a microphone.
Yes, the question was, could I chime in about my partnership with airlines? In the case of Panama, in talking with the ambassador of Panama, he has great relationships with them. And we have said that we really wanted to approach international airline Copa Airlines about forming a partnership, and in exchange for reduced fares if we could, or free fares, or shipping of materials. In this case, he set up meetings for us with the people that are here, and we negotiated some very amenable terms for travel within certain time frames. You have to, of course, if you're going with airlines and things, you have to keep in mind they have blackout dates. There's a lot of things they have to take into account too. The hard thing about negotiating with airlines is that they're going to say, what's in it for me? In the case of like the Panamanian airline, though, it's a national airline owned by the government, owned by the people. So what's in it for you? We're helping your people. That's what's in it for you. Unlike something like Delta or United, which are private carriers or something, which may be a little bit of a different thing. So what I would encourage you to do in these cases, if you're going to foreign countries, if there is a foreign carrier that is owned by the government there, approach them about what you're doing. Oftentimes they will assist. Can't guarantee it, but oftentimes they will. Anyone else? Okay, well, thank you all. You come in person.
Hi everyone. I misspoke earlier. The poster judging session will happen from now, 3:45 until 4:30. So that's happening outside. We'll also have snacks right now, and then we'll have our breakout session. So if you have any questions, let us know.